Hello guys, Templar here, and today I will be talking to you guys about the ancient slavery in Celtic Europe. Now this type of topic is kind of hard to explain. Slavery in ancient Celtic Europe is somewhat of a dialect tone, I guess you might say. It's kind of hard to explain, but at the same time easy to explain. For example, if we look into ancient Celtic Europe, we see slavery, but not the type of slavery we might see. In fact, Celtic slavery was what you might call an IOU, if you kind of call it that. In fact, if you were to technically actually, well, for example, say for example, like, you didn't have enough money to pay for a sword to a blacksmith, so you ended up having to be his slave for a while. In other words, you technically are doing a favor. Well, technically to the Celtic guys, that's the form of slavery. So it was slow slavery since you weren't being paid. Now, to this day, it's kind of weird why the ancient Celts did this type of form of slavery, but it actually worked out. In fact, for how long for example, for how long a blacksmith had actually made the sword for you, you're gonna have to work that same amount of months, plus as well also retrieving resources that also cost the same. So in other words, you're pretty much just still a slave for an entire year or two or maybe three. And it kept that up until the end. But as well, Celtic slavery has other forms of type of ideals, which we can also see in medieval Europe. Which you guys are probably wondering, wait, medieval Europe? What? Well, medieval Europe had serfdom, and just like the Celts, the ancient Celts had serfdom. Under the protection of the noble chieftain, the noble chieftain would protect his people and his subjects with his sword, which is kind of like what we might see in medieval Europe with the knights and the nobles. And so there were serfs, but these serfs were technically free at birth. They weren't bound by slavery. It's complicated, as I stated. But in slavery, the ancient Celtic people actually had laws. For example, you couldn't rape a slave, you couldn't kill a slave, and in fact you couldn't do anything illegal to a slave unless you were willing to get punished. Now, this type of caste system was actually forged by the Druids, and the Druids actually found out that this is actually a little bit more safer than anything else. But another weird thing also when we see at Celtic slavery is also the fact that the ancient Celts even raided other people. Now you guys might ask, well, what might happen if, say, a female or a male was taken prisoner and became a slave to this one other Celtic tribe? Or if you were Roman and became a slave to the Celtic tribe? Well, that's the thing. The Celts would treat you fairly. They wouldn't mistreat you like a Greek or a Roman would to his slave. Because when we take a look at those type of forms of slavery, it's kind of messed up. Now, also when we do look at slavery in the ancient Celtic world, we also see that ancient slaves in the ancient warfare were also seen. In fact, there is actually an ancient Celtic poem called the Urdal. Now, the Urdal was actually known to have been made out of a type of wax stone. Of what the substance was when it was originally, well, casted, we have no idea. A lot of people even state it might have been beeswax. We have no idea either. But that actually brings me to my next description about the Celts and slavery. If you were a slave and you wanted to get out of slavery a lot faster, you could pick up the sword and go off to warfare. That's one idea, but it didn't turn out so well. Which I think you guys all might know what might happen if you were in slavery and you ended up getting killed by another opponent. Well, that's the thing about Celts. They kind of believed in the type of system, kind of like Buddhism or caste system, that you technically get reborn after death. So, in other words, if you die a heroic death, you pretty much become back to life in the next form. Now we wonder, well, what does that have to do with Celtic slavery? Well, that actually represents a lot of things. It represents to the Celts that everyone is truly equal. No matter what they are or who they are, doesn't matter if they are, well, black, white, Hispanic, it doesn't matter who they are. It just matters of what they call themselves, and that would be a human being. Now, many people even still to this day kind of wonder, okay, then why did the Celts actually have slavery in the first place? Well, as I stated in the original parts, it was actually a form of, well, doing a favor, or as well, paying off an IOU. In other words, it kind of escalated into different forms. But when it came to warfare, that's when slavery kind of kicked off. Now, Celtic slavery didn't expand like we think. Now, normally when we think of slavery, oh, it expands throughout all the empire of the Celtic people. No. The Celtic people didn't actually have an entire empire of slavery. In fact, Celts were what you might call a military type army of tribes, kind of like our Native Americans, if we kind of think about it here in the States. So, yeah. But when we look at the Celts, we see that when they actually invented slavery, it didn't catch on. In fact, only a few people actually had slavery. And the form of slavery wasn't actually harsh at all. You weren't whipped. You weren't mistreated. You were technically treated like a human being, which is weird of why we don't see this in the modern world, actually. But now, this type of form of slavery was so inspiring, some Romans even acted like this, and later on were mistreated by their fellow Romans. Kind of a buzzkill if you ask me, Rome. But as well, even some Southerners during the time before the American Civil War, and as well some Northerners even did this as well. Now, you guys might wonder, wait, what, Northerners? Yes, I will be also getting into this very shortly. But ancient Celtic slavery's ideals later on invent into many other ways. In fact, later on we even see that in the ideal forms of abolitionism, which actually show that slaves should have more rights. That technically sounds like Celtic words to me. In fact, the ancient Celts viewed everything that is tied to the land. In other words, if one man is born in this land, and if a nobleman is born upon the land, and a peasant is, then they are truly equal. Meaning that the gods don't want them to be separated, which actually makes sense. Nowadays, though, you don't see that anymore, so nobody hears that in Celtic history to know. Anyways, guys, if you found this helpful, let me know down in the comments below. If you guys want me to cover more on Celtic slavery, also let me know. And if you guys want me to cover anything else on slavery, like Roman or Greek slavery next, or as well even types of Viking, Norse, or even Native American even, or something like that, let me also know down in the comments below. Anyways, guys, this is Templar, and have a good day.